Okay, boomer, is all you can say when you've got your back up. Okay, boomer, tripping and grabbing onto something to relax, but the only problem is that you get defensive instead of thinking about solving the issue if you just listened. I'm sad, and I have been for a while now, and I just thought that these mean voices would eventually quiet down. And every time I try to speak up and let it be heard, it upsets you, so I bottle it up, not to hurt you, and it's stressful. So please just hear these words and know that I don't need a miracle. I just need a companion who can hold me and say I'm hearing you. Because when my feet get closer to the edge that I'm nearing, dude, my last thought is all these people's hearts which would tear in two. And that was a submission of a poem by the wondrous Mystic Sandman, someone who we really don't know. Could be in the future, could be in the past, could be in all at the same time. We don't even know which universe this man has come from, but he dropped in. I opened up my email box, and there it was. This beautiful poem, talking about, I think this whole movement around trying to work towards better mental health for a lot of people, where it's still it's kind of only if it's convenient for the people who are running events, only if it's convenient for the people who want to be seen as these mental health advocates. I still don't believe it's one event that is going to solve everything. I think it's going to just be people who have kind hearts throughout the community who can continue to be there for different people. So, yes, I do sound like I have a flu. I do sound like I'm all blocked up. It is not COVID, but it's probably contagious. So, good thing I am recording through this stuff and you can hear me and listen to me, and I can still get this voice out without you being infected, unless somehow we've figured out how to do that as well. But yeah, just with the whole COVID stuff, so what I want to talk about today is sadness and how we can be sad a little bit better. I've been extremely sad, or like a bit more sad. I talked about languishing earlier, and I was kind of thriving for a little bit, and then you get sickness, then you get tired, then you get a bunch of stressful events, and then you get, all of these other things on top of that, and having to deal with different people, coordinating people, be social, and you can start to feel overwhelmed, and one of the feelings that can come with that is sadness. And I just had a reflection, started thinking a little bit more, and I thought about all of the different, I've talked about anger, I've talked about languishing, I've talked about really just different feelings overall, and then the commonalities between why it is that we can't feel these feelings, why it is that when we try to feel these feelings, it just doesn't sit well with us, and it doesn't sit well with others. And this is when I'm thinking we need to start changing that whole, discussion around feelings. And that's what I'm going to get into today. So we know what we're into, we know what we're in for. Let's buckle up and get into it. Yeah, right. So it all started basically when people started getting COVID, which we know is the inevitable, right? So if something's spreading like wildfire, people are going to catch it. And when people do get COVID, the people are getting sick. And some people, I'm not going to talk about symptoms, I'm not going to talk about how sick people get. And I really don't like talking about COVID in general, because it's just something that's become part of our everyday kind of vernacular. And, it is a bit of a downer. But what I'm noticing is that people are very apologetic for getting sick. Right, we were also apologetic before COVID, but now that people are more likely to get COVID, you'd think that people will be a bit more understanding when they get sick or when they get COVID. Now, the fact that people apologize and feel guilty for getting sick, I think is part of the problem, is that we're not allowed to not be okay. Right, so everyone says it's okay to not be okay unless it's these things. So that's where it starts, and then also I was just like, when people ask if you are okay, and like this is the whole, quite a few people do it, this is not new, but I feel like when people say, how are you, and then how are you really, it's not about how open that person is to answering that question. I think it was also to do with the person who's asking the question. So there's a lot of us who are going to be extremely, we're going to be secretive. We're not secretive because we don't want to, we don't want people to know, but actually we don't want people to know, but we don't want specific people to know, because the currency that people can have if they know how you're feeling can be quite manipulative. So if people know that sort of stuff, that's kind of, it's not that we're hiding because we don't know how we feel. I feel like we have a sense of how we feel, but there are just people that we won't share that sort of information with. So the "are you okay?" and having to answer, it's almost like it's socially correct to say "I'm good." No, yeah, I am okay. And it's a secondhand thing that just comes right away, and it's something that we don't think of. Now, that's not a very nuanced answer for me, because I'm sure a lot of people discuss this, but if you are hearing this, and there are times where people ask you, "Are you okay?" and you reply immediately with, "I am okay," and you're not okay, start thinking about the environment that you're actually in. Who's the person asking? Because I can tell you, if someone else was to ask someone that you were closer with, someone that you were close with, or someone that you feel like would actually understand or take that time to listen to you and take that time to actually take it in, and not necessarily offer solutions, but offer an ear, just to be like, "I am here, I'm listening, I understand that that's how you feel, and I got you." Right? It doesn't matter what they do to have you, but you just know that this person has you. I think that's when we're going to start making those changes, is when we start exploring the environments that we're actually in. This whole "it's okay to not be okay," I've said this a bajillion times, but like reaching out from some people who feel so isolated, and this is why, the reason why this is coming up is because this week was a classic example of how I just started going in, and I just isolated more, and I just needed to get through what I needed to get through. I knew I could see the tunnel, I could see the end of the tunnel, but there are people who aren't as, aren't as versed with having to deal with the emotions that I am, because I'm just, once again, this is probably episode 36 of saying it, but I am Fields Armstrong, and I've dealt with these emotions a lot, and I'm not saying that I'm very good at dealing with these emotions, but I know when they're starting to come, and I know whether it's something that I can get out of or not. And I know some people don't have that skill just yet because they haven't been working on it as a skill. But when you are, getting to a point where you feel like, "Oh, there's not necessarily, I don't see a way to get out of this," it is hard to start reaching out. And you say, "It's okay, just reach out, we're here for you." But some people don't want to reach out, or they don't feel safe reaching out, because we still are in this place where it's only okay if it's convenient for you at that time to take that information. So yeah, this is just me rattling a little bit, but basically with the sadness that's been happening, I don't know if it's sadness when I saw it, but I went to, so we have this thing called a Pacific Grad, which is like a breakfast for Pacific peoples who are graduating, and it's prior to the main event where everyone goes and walks across the stage. And when I was there, we were celebrating, a few people who have, had amazing accomplishments. But when people get up, and I started noticing that people do it more often, is they would apologize for starting to cry. And it's like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cry," or "Sorry, I promised myself I wouldn't cry," and all that. And I'm just like, "Cry, baby. Just cry, like let it out, because that's a joy, or that's a burst of emotion that is allowing you to express in that time." And I still feel like we're not allowed. We haven't been. Even when we were children, you were reprimanded for crying. If you're crying now, I'll give you something to cry about. Like, it was always the worst thing that you could possibly do is cry. It's like, "Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry." Oh my gosh, when maybe if we were just allowed to cry and allowed to let it all out, we wouldn't see that it's actually something that should be reprimanded. It's something that we should just be like, "Oh yeah, cool, you need to go cry." And maybe they'd start having like 5-minute cry stations in different places where that if you need to go, let out some sort of emotion, let out some sort of, because tell me, all right? So there's a few things. You have a feed, you have a nap, you have a cry. Most instances, you feel slightly better after. And there's actually research saying that when you do cry and you release that sort of emotion, or you release that, have that expression of emotion, you actually start to release, decrease kind of the signs of stress. So your stress level will start to come down a little bit, and that's a hormonal change in the body, as well as just, I think you just let the cap off a whole, I always use this, fizzy bottle, and you're just starting to let the pressure off just a little bit. And I think when you do cry, you've acknowledged that there is emotion there. And that's the beginning of starting to say, okay, we need some sort of change. I think the crying at the beginning for yourself is the signal to yourself that, like, this has become too much. And you notice when most people have a cry, well, actually, maybe I'm speaking for myself, when you have that cry and you have that, that little moment to yourself, that's when you start saying, okay, I need to do less of this. This is stressing me too much. You start really evaluating the different parts of your life that caused you to get to that point. It's like the anger that I was talking about. It's pretty much every emotion. And I always, I'm just using each of these emotions, and I'm pretty much using the same episode like structure just to show you that all of these emotions are not bad things, but we've been conditioned to think that they're bad, because when you get angry, you get put in detention. Well, I did. When you get sad, you get told not to cry, or like, you can't be sad now. They're never, like, unless you're happy or unless you're okay. Even when you're happy now, people pull you down. Like, you can't be too happy because other people can't be happy. You're too privileged. Like, all of these emotions that take us past just being and just normal, just what is considered normal anyway. Sorry, I won't use that word. Just emotions that are beyond you just existing and just being there and just like they're emotions that we're not allowed to show. And it's because there's some sort of, like, at the other end of the spectrum, there's someone who just says like, oh, okay, but you're lucky you have this, you're lucky you have this. But we're allowed to feel those things. The sadness is the impetus for change, and also you're more likely to do stuff that's going to make the change happen, right? So like I said before, when you cry, you're usually at nearing the end of just like what you can what your capacity to handle things at that moment. When you cry, that is then the signal to you that this change needs to happen, or something needs to happen, and you reflect on everything that's going on. Or you're just like, all right, recoup, and then back into it. But then how long does it take before you cry again? And I've always been called sensitive, so I cry often. I don't try to cry. There were just times where I was going through dark patches where I couldn't speak without thinking I was going to cry. It didn't matter what I was talking about. It's just my brain was so, like, had a lot of sadness. So every time I'd speak, it felt like someone was like, I just had an orange stuck in my throat, and like my eyes would water when I was trying to speak. And the worst, the times that I would cry most was when like someone would ask me if I'm okay, and it was someone that I felt safe with, because then I would just say, nah, bro, I'm not doing well. And as soon as that happens, I just like waterworks, and I didn't necessarily need anything. I didn't need them to be like, look, we're going to conquer the world. They just were there, and they understood that this is probably why, all of these other days I haven't been quite myself, or all of these other days, I wasn't producing the work that I'm used to. And I think that when we start to have this sort of compassion for one another, or when we start to be a little bit more open, people who understand you the most, and I've had really amazing people supporting me so far, where if I just tell them like, this is me right now, they'll tell me, do you need to take a day off? Oh, do you need a break from all of this sort of stuff? I've got people who actually have my back. I also have people on the opposite end who just think like I'm too sensitive and that it's a problem, and that I should probably go get it checked out, which I am getting checked out because I get help weekly. But yeah, I still think it's around these Western notions of not being able to express these feelings. And now I just think like in most cultures, this expression is normal. It's because we show that we're hurt. Like if you've ever been to a Māori tangihanga or a funeral, a Māori funeral, there's wailing. Like there's open expressions of wailing. It's part of the custom of a tangihanga where they'll just have people. So when I say wailing, it's a very loud cry, and it's heard throughout everyone, just to express to everyone that this person is hurting. They're in a lot of pain. This whole whānau is in a lot of pain. There's a lot of mamai, a lot of hurt. And that's not something, this is now a classic example of when you're allowed to cry. I guess there's like there's societal norms of when you're allowed to be sad. But what I'm saying is that you can be sad, like sad, mad, glad all the time. These are just rolling emotions that happen, and sometimes they linger a little bit longer, and sometimes you feel like you're never going to be able to get out of them. But we talk about our hurt, and being sad can make you sick if that's not what you want to feel. So because I think we block it so much when we don't want to feel it, and then we start to feel it, we do everything that we can to like hide it up. And it's I say this with every other emotion, when it comes up and you bottle it, it just gets worse. It never goes away. And yeah, so coming back to the sadness and why I don't think we're allowed to feel it is because we have this toxic positivity. And I hate using the word toxic, and I hate using it with positivity, and I hate talking about, just people, just be better. It's okay. We can be happy. Oh, don't worry about that. Like, if we're just happy, if we just think positive thoughts, it's all going to go away. That's bullshit. And we know it's bullshit because you have people there who would just like put on the fakest smile ever, but they haven't really dealt with the underlying issue. They're treating the symptoms, like symptoms of sadness, by just saying, let's smile. So like, stop frowning, start smiling. But you're not actually treating the hurt
that it has caused you, and you don't end up treating the hurt that it's caused you if you haven't acknowledged it. So being able to cry, I'd say was the first, is being able to feel those triggers, to know that when that sadness is coming up, and then just deal with it and just be okay with it, and find yourself a group of people who allow you to have that moment and allow you to have those moments. And then also for yourself, to be compassionate with yourself when you start to feel those. And I do feel like there's this new wave of like, sorry, I'm not. Maybe men do it as well, but not so much. But because we're just trying to talk in general. But where there's this whole moving from the sad bitch to the bad bitch. It's like, well, you don't have to ignore those emotions. Like, you can be bad, but also be sad. I reckon when you're bad, like when you know you're bad, but then you also allow yourself to be sad, that's when you're ultimate baddie. That's when you're the ultimate baddie. Is because you know your emotions. You're not hiding it because you're trying to build up this independent thing. You can be independent and have feelings. You're probably more independent if you know what your feelings are. So that's where we're at. We're in this culture where even though we're trying to promote positive mental health, we're saying that we should be less like that. We should have less feelings. And when we do talk about it, you can only talk about it in a particular forum where this is kind of okay. But then what happens after that point? What I'm trying to say is these conversations need to happen daily. These conversations need to happen all the time. These conversations with yourself need to happen quite regularly. The reflections that you have. So if you are feeling sad, what are some things that you could do? The first thing is you can just don't feel shame for having sadness. Don't apologize for people if you don't apologize to people if you are sad. We apologize about it quite a bit, and we don't talk about the things that actually make us sad. So the things that make you sad now might be things that like happened years ago that you just haven't processed. And all of that processing is part of making you who you are, but also understanding why it is that you are hurt. So like this is, hurt people then go on to hurt people, or hurt people, can't, I'm not saying they can't, but they don't necessarily, they can easily take on a lot of like burden and start to feel like, I am the reason that this is happening to me. When there are obviously a lot of things that just haven't been dealt with. So have that for yourself. And I feel like the more that we talk about it and the more that we kind of, just share stories, it gives us an opportunity to connect with others. And when we connect with others, we actually don't know, but like we're built for social connection. We're built for that, and that's always going to be a positive for us. So if, like I said, if you find that positive environment that you want to be part of, but also people that understand you, when you start to see that how you feel is not unnormal, right? When you feel these negative emotions, or like we shouldn't even call them negative emotions. They're emotions. They're signals for you to say, look, something's not quite right here. If you start to see that you are with people who value that part of you because it's something that allows them to have reflections as well, or you can even like go back and forth and share that dialogue with one another, you become part of a solution because you're starting to see this worked for me. And other people might be starting to come through it. And if you've already been through it, this is why I started the podcast. And I get that question a lot. It's why did you start this podcast? It's because I was wrecked. I am wrecked occasionally. And I reflect on it. And I feel like now that I'm having this, social connection, it's weird because I'm not sitting in a group with you. But at the same time, I feel like I can see you all listening to me when we chat and when I speak. But, there's something that you can do. There's something that you can share, or there's someone that can share with you that is also going to make the journey a lot easier. So don't judge it. If you start to feel it, don't judge it. Don't fight it. Numbing and avoiding those feelings, that's what I feel like disassociates ourselves from ourselves. Because the more you avoid it, the more you're avoiding yourself. Because those feelings are part of you. There's something that's happening. It's an evolutionary trigger that's been set inside of you so that when it does happen, you know that you need to do something about it. And I feel like, so even last year, like if you think about me now, like I had one beer last night and it's the first beer that I've had since New Year's. Last year and the year before, I became a full-blown alcoholic. I was drinking pretty much every day because I didn't, like I was going to counseling and all that sort of stuff, and I came up with every excuse for why I was drinking. And it was because, I had these sad feelings and I had these sad thoughts and I was trying to get away from it. And because I wasn't acknowledging it and I was using drinking as like the mechanism to get out of it, that's why when you disassociate from your feelings and then that happens and then we start to, get into other things that pretty much addiction to numb that part of ourselves, addiction to not face that part of ourselves, because it can be hard and it can be hurtful. And I'm not saying that this is going to be easy once you start talking about your feelings, because when you do start talking about your feelings and when you do start becoming aware of why these feelings are coming, a lot of other things come up, like a lot of other realizations. But the sooner you can start this process, the sooner you can start to have compassion for when you are feeling those different ways. And when other people speak with you, you start to feel, you start to find that a lot of people want to, can relate with you because you're relatable yourself. You can relate to yourself in that time. So yeah, just rest. I just don't think rest itself is never really given the props it deserves. We're always aiming to give so much, oh yeah, you're the man. Wow, yeah, you're the woman. For the people who will work through sickness and work through illness and just keep working and work horses, but we don't ever congratulate the people who take time for themselves. For example, and maybe she's listening, who knows, but one of our colleagues, she's on RSL. So RSL is where you get to take some time off from your regular job and discover yourself a little bit, get a little bit just do some courses or do something that you feel is going to help you become a better researcher when you come back. And she got COVID. We had an event that was going to come up, and that's what put a little bit of stress on, but it wasn't too stressful. It was something that we could definitely handle, and I had a really good team to help me take care of it. But the guilt that she felt because she had to leave us with it is just take some time off. I was absolutely relieved that she got this time because I celebrate rest. When you're tired and you you're not going to produce your best, take that rest. Take that time for yourself and you'll come back even better. And I've done a whole episode on that, so check back at 2 years ago when I did that. But that's all we need to do. That's all we need to do. And I think, if we give ourselves that rest will come if we start to acknowledge when we are not quite feeling ourselves. And then in that time, you can give yourself the compassion to be able to, give yourself that grace that this may not be the time for you necessarily to do the tasks you are trying to do. So basically, all I've been saying is when you're sad, feel that sadness and just own who you are, right? That's me in that moment. That's me. I'm coming as me. If people talk about being unapologetically all that shit, all that bullshit, where some of it's good, a lot of it is great, but a lot of it I still feel like a lot of it ignores who you are centrally. A lot of it is talking about, you just need to be unapologetically you, but you're not exploring who you are. You're coming with what you think it means to be you, but if you're ignoring your emotions, you're not even being you, because that's a primal instinct. That's something that's part of you. So be that, own that. Don't judge it, have no stigma around it, and if these feelings come up even more, you just need to sit with it a little bit and just know that it's not bad, right? You're sad for a reason. And then if it continues for a while, maybe there are other avenues that we can start to find help for it, but at least you have had that trigger to understand that you need help for it. That's where we're going to go if we start realizing that this is the tipping point. Right? We have too many people who are going alone thinking that they are not normal, when I'll tell you, a lot of people relate to everything that I'm saying right now, and you'll just believe that I am in your head right now. But it's because it's way more common than you think. You're not alone. This is why I want to be telling you about it. So when you speak to people, you don't necessarily need to try and fix things. So this is what we'd want if we're sad, is when I say something to you, I don't necessarily need you to try and fix it. I just need someone to speak to, soundboard, and hear it. But obviously, I want to make sure that you're safe when I'm going to do it. So I'll ask permission, do you feel like you have the energy to do it? Otherwise, I'll speak with my counsellor, which I'm privileged to have. The next is just acceptance, just knowing that this sadness is a part of life. This is going to come up when things don't really work with you or don't necessarily, sit well with you. And this is something that I need to be a bit more honest with, and that I've just had this weird sadness recently. Just going through a lot of the dark times that I have been going through, and just me pushing to get my doctorate, get all these different jobs, and be so young and so accomplished, where I thought that once I got there I wouldn't be sad anymore. But a lot of my sadness actually comes from getting to that point and realizing, shit, I've got a lot that I have to work on, because this just hasn't brought me the happiness that I thought I would, have, or thought that I would get once I got it. So it's kind of like this anticlimactic, like, but I'm accepting it. I'm accepting it now, and I'm knowing that it all comes from within. And for me to give myself grace to know that, it's bloody amazing what I've done. And the sadness that I feel is because I was empty, and I wasn't filling that void with the right stuff. I wasn't filling that void with stuff that is within me, with a pride for myself, with an acknowledgement of the feelings that I had. And that's the last point, is that there may not be a plan, and acceptance that sad things happen can just bring some content. That's fair enough. That was going to happen. These are just feelings. These are just emotions, and I'm rolling with it. So anyway, I hope you have taken something away from today. If anything, I hope this was a discussion that you have needed to have for a long time. If anything, I hope that this brings you some sort of solace in knowing that you're not the only one who feels these feelings or has this overwhelming burst of crying and just doesn't feel like there's something wrong with you anymore. You just know that it was needed, it was necessary, and then we move on and roll. So that's my weekly episode for you today. How to be sad a little bit better, or how to just be sad, or be sad if you need to be sad. But remember, your feelings don't define you. So just because you were sad doesn't mean that you're a stain on the society. You were sad in that moment, and then we have different moments that make up an entire day, and in those different moments, you express different parts of yourself. So you're not necessarily tied up with that particular instant when that happened. But anyway, I do love you all. Thank you for joining me. There's a lot that I didn't speak about, but I just wanted to nail that, keep it nice and concise. So yeah, whatever you take away from it, please let me know so that I can continue to give you the good content, or I hope it's good content. But thank you for listening as always. I love you all. Have a great week.